Chapter 2102. Xue Xue was as fast as lightning. Although it was accidentally burned by Dumpling, it was only a flesh wound and was not serious. Under its lead, Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu rushed into the depths of the desert. On the other side, Dugu Mabao and the other two had already realized that something was wrong when Dumpling and Zichen were swallowed by the vortex. Why isn't it over yet? Diu Zhangzi couldn't help but curse. First, they tried to attack Yu. Seeing that it didn't work, they changed their target to Dumpling. Now, even Zichen is implicated. Debao, you didn't attack just now? Dugu Mabao originally had its eyes closed, but after hearing that, it suddenly coughed a few times and blood flowed from its lips. Diu Zhangzi and Lan Zhao's expressions changed. They had already fought. Debao! You! Dugu Mabao slowly opened his eyes. A dark glint seemed to flash across his eyes before disappearing in an instant. He raised his hand and slowly wiped the blood from the corner of his lips, and his eyes drooped slightly. The bright red color on the back of his hand deeply stimulated his eyes. I couldn't stop it. He had just gone through a dangerous month, and he was in a very weak state, so he couldn't use all his strength. As for the thing below, it was the opposite. In actual fact, ever since he noticed that the thing wanted to attack Chu Luiwei, he had been on tenterhooks and had maintained his guard up. When Dumpling was in danger, he immediately realized that something was wrong. Unfortunately, he still couldn't stop it. Diu Zhangzi and Lan Xiao fell into silence. Dugu Mabao was the strongest among the three, and he was also the only one with a divine body. If even he said that, then, however, although I couldn't stop it, that thing is also injured. It should be obedient for a while. Dugu Mabao's words didn't make them feel at ease. That's Yu's contracted fiend. Lan Xiao leaned against the wall and covered his face with one hand as he said slowly, "Don't worry. She won't let it go. If I had known earlier, I would have warned her. That thing has been plotting for a long time. Now that it finally has the chance, it naturally won't let it go." Dugu Mabao's expression was cold. Don't forget, Dumpling is a crimson gold heavenly phoenix, and she has the purest bloodline. Even if it didn't happen this time, there will be a next time. Diu Zhangzi sighed. That's true. But what should we do now? Lan Xiao and I are unable to leave this place in a short period of time. Only you can help Yu. Actually, Dugu Mabao's current situation wasn't optimistic. If it wasn't for him, Lan Zhao's life would have been in danger. He himself was also severely injured. Dugu Mabao slowly clenched his fists. Now that things have come to this, it's too late to stop them. Originally, he had planned to wait for her to break through to the Supreme God level. However, now that Dumpling and Zichen had disappeared together, she would not leave so easily. Furthermore, the agreement back then clearly stated that we were not to confront that thing head-on. Once one party takes the initiative to break this agreement, the other party will be able to kill them completely. Now is definitely not the time to fall out with them. He said, "Let's wait and see first." Under Xue Xue's lead, Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu quickly arrived at the place. When she saw the whirlpool above the desert, Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat. This was almost exactly the same as the whirlpool that had appeared under her feet previously. It was just that this one looked bigger and deeper. Although they were still a short distance away from the whirlpool, Chu Luiwei could already feel a cold and sinister aura slowly spreading out from inside. An invisible pressure enveloped the entire area, making it almost impossible to breathe. A thought instantly appeared in Chu Luiwei's mind. This place is extremely dangerous. Xue Xue stopped and whimpered softly. Chu Luiwei immediately understood what it meant. You're saying that Dumpling and Zichen have both entered this place? Xue Xue nodded vigorously. Chu Luiwei took a few more steps forward. At this moment, she and Rong Xiu were standing in the air above the whirlpool. She instinctively felt that if she went any further, it would be extremely dangerous. However, she could still clearly see the situation below from here. A whirlpool had appeared above the vast and boundless desert. Sand constantly gushed out from below and surged in all directions. The entire whirlpool was slowly rotating in an anti-clockwise direction. The deepest part of the whirlpool was pitch black. For some reason, the moment Chu Luiwei looked down, She inexplicably felt as if she was being stared at by a pair of eyes. Cold, indifferent, evil, greedy, and crazy. Chu Liyue's heart instantly felt as if it was being gripped tightly by something. At this moment, a familiar feeling came to her heart. Suddenly, her eyes widened. She remembered now. This aura was exactly the same as the hand buried under Lingxiao College's mountain of wine. Peach Blossom Cove. The night was hazy. The pitch-black room was completely silent. Suddenly, Sun Yi opened his eyes and quickly stood up. He picked up his clothes from the side and put them on before quickly walking out. The moment he opened the door, 13, who was sleeping next to him, heard the commotion. He also got up and poked his head out to look over. "Big brother, what's wrong?" Sun Yi did not look at him. He said indifferently, "Go back and stay here." He hurriedly left as he spoke. 13 nodded and watched as Sun Yi quickly left. He could not help but frown. Big brother seems to be in a hurry. What is he going to do? Sun Yi walked out of the courtyard. He had just turned a corner when he bumped into someone. It was Chang Wanzhou. He blocked Sun Yi's path. "Where are you going?" "Wonderful Book House." Chapter 2103. Sun Yi glanced at him. "Naturally, I'm going where I should go." Chang Wanzhou pursed his lips. "I'll go with you." Sun Yi's eyes flickered as he carefully sized up Chang Wanzhou. He became alert. "What do you know?" Not many people knew that there was trouble on his master's side. Judging from Chang Wanzhou's appearance, not only did he know something, he didn't come later than him. Chang Wanzhou was silent for a moment. "I don't know. I just felt uneasy and happened to see you come out." Sun Yi narrowed his eyes slightly as he scrutinized Chang Wanzhou with his long, narrow, and indifferent eyes. Chang Wanzhou met his gaze calmly. What he said just now was indeed true. For some reason, he felt that something was going to happen tonight. He had planned to come out for a walk, but he happened to bump into Sun Yi. Now, Chu Liyue and Rong Xiu weren't in Peach Blossom Cove. Everything was basically handed over to Sun Yi. Something was clearly wrong for him to suddenly come out in such a hurry. There was no need to guess. It was definitely related to Chu Liyue. After a brief standoff, Sun Yi stepped forward and swept past Chang Wanzhou. "You're not qualified." He was saying that Chang Wanzhou wasn't strong enough. His tone was as calm and cold as usual, but it was precisely because of this that his words were especially sharp. Chang Wanzhou stepped forward again and stopped him. His soft golden hair fell down, covering his eyes and brows. It was almost impossible to tell under the night sky. He enunciated each word clearly. "How do you know that I'm not qualified?" Sun Yi couldn't be bothered with him. Just as he was about to turn and leave, he suddenly saw a totem faintly discernible between Chang Wanzhou's brows. He stopped in his tracks. A rare look of shock appeared on his usually expressionless face. Chang Wanzhou retracted his aura, and the totem quickly disappeared. "Are you qualified now?" Phoenix God Mountain. The Phoenix Shrine was brightly lit. The door of the temple was shut tight, and there was silence all around. Only Elder Yu was standing at the bottom of the steps in front of the door. He would look at the sky from time to time, then look at the Phoenix Shrine, as if he was waiting for something. His face carried a hint of nervousness. After a long time, the door of the temple opened, and a figure walked out. It was Yizhao, Patriarch. Elder Yu hurriedly went forward. "How is it?" Yizhao shook his head. "Not yet." A look of disappointment appeared in Elder Yu's eyes, but it quickly dissipated as he consoled. "This matter is extremely difficult to begin with. Our Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan has existed for so many years, and there are very few who have been able to open the 8th meridian. But now that you've touched the threshold, you still have a very high chance of success. If it doesn't work this time, maybe next time." If anyone else was here, they would definitely be shocked to hear this. Because the 8th meridian belonged to the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan, a legendary level. In all these years, no more than 3 people in the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan had succeeded. Yi Zhao had spent most of his time in the Phoenix Shrine, and everyone in the clan thought that he was just cultivating as usual. After all, he spent most of his time here as well. Other than Elder Yu, no one knew that he was actually trying to open the 8th meridian. But the result was unsatisfactory, and after some effort he still failed. Hearing Elder Yu's words, Yizhao waved his hand carelessly. "I know all this. As the patriarch, and also the strongest existence in the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan closest to opening the 8th meridian, he knew better than anyone how difficult it was to cross this threshold. From the day he became the patriarch until today, he had stayed in the 7th meridian for far too long. Actually, he didn't have much hope in this matter, but for some reason, he vaguely felt that he seemed to have grasped the knack of it, so he was tempted. Naturally, it would be best if he could succeed. If he couldn't, he would have a clear conscience even if he tried his best. At this level, what was needed was not just hard work, but also talent and opportunity. Therefore, Yizhao was very open-minded about this matter. Seeing Yizhao like this, Elder Yu also heaved a sigh of relief. But it would be a lie to say that he didn't regret it. If Yizhao could really open the 8th meridian, the entire Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan would be greatly encouraged. "How is Dumpling recently?" Yizhao asked. Elder Yu gathered his thoughts, and when he mentioned Dumpling, he couldn't help but smile. "I heard that some time ago, in the battle between Shangguanyu and Yi Wentao was defeated miserably. Dumpling also successfully opened her 5th meridian after that battle." This news had been spreading like wildfire in the entire Divine Ruins world recently, and it was hard not to know. However, Yizhao had been in seclusion recently, so he didn't know. When he heard this, Yizhao was both surprised and delighted. Really? So fast? It hadn't been long since Dumpling opened her 3rd meridian at Phoenix Godly Mountain. Yizhao originally thought that Dumpling would only be able to open her 5th meridian after a few more years. Unexpectedly, of course it's true. Shangguanyu is very powerful now, and it complements Dumpling. They are both successful. Yizhao was full of smiles, and he was rather emotional. Speaking of which, Ancestor really had a discerning eye. Back then, we didn't agree with Dumpling continuing to follow Shangguanyu, but Ancestor insisted. Who would have thought that this day would come? After hearing about the recent events, Yu couldn't help but sigh. Dumpling following that woman was indeed the right choice. A faint smile appeared on Yizhao's usually cold and dignified face. Although it was just a flash, it was extremely rare. Ancestor has great foresight, and Dumpling is also very smart. There are so many cultivators in the world, but it chose the best one at a glance. As expected of the bloodline of the Crimson Gold Sky Phoenix clan. His words were filled with pride. Elder Yu silently glanced at him, too embarrassed to remind him. Who was the one who didn't agree to Dumpling forming a contract with Shangguanyu and even threatened her? As Yizhao spoke, he changed the topic. However, Shangguanyu? Previously, she said that she would bring Dumpling back to visit when she has time. It's been so long, so why haven't we heard anything? Yu hurriedly said. Didn't they just occupy Peach Blossom Dock a while ago? They should be the busiest during this period of time. They will probably come back when everything is on the right track. Dumpling must miss us a lot, right? Speaking of this, Yizhao's expression softened. After pondering for a long time, he sighed softly. Dumpling has the purest bloodline and is extremely talented. She is also very smart. Opening the 8th meridian is extremely difficult for the rest of the clan, but it might be within reach for her. She might even be able to reach the peak in the future. Suddenly, his expression changed. Oh no, something happened to Dumpling. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2104. Elder Yu was also shocked when he heard this. Patriarch, what's wrong? Yizhao frowned. Dumpling's aura is gone. Ever since the incident in the God-slaying tomb, he had a lingering fear in his heart. He had purposely left a way to connect with Dumpling's aura. But now, the connection was suddenly broken. Elder Yu's heart sank. How could this be? Shouldn't Dumpling be at the Yuntian Tower with Shangguanyu and the others? Some time ago, Bailey Jun died. Rong Xiao and Shangguanyu rushed back to the Yuntian Tower. They haven't heard any other news. If they were at the Yuntian Tower, this wouldn't have happened. Yizhao quickly made a judgment in his heart and said decisively. They are definitely not at the Yuntian Tower now. That was Rong Xiu's territory. Chu Luiwei had just taken over the Peach Blossom Dock and was in the limelight. No one would be stupid enough to go to the Yuntian Tower at this time to cause trouble for them. The only explanation was, they had already left the Yuntian Tower. Patriarch, can you confirm the location of Dumpling's aura before it disappeared? Li Xiao closed his eyes and pondered. Then he opened his eyes and frowned. I can't. The distance is too far. Moreover, he had just come out of seclusion. All his thoughts and attention were focused on opening his meridians. He didn't have time to think about anything else. Then, Elder Yi was also in a dilemma. Li Xiao thought for a moment and said decisively, you stay in the Yuntian Tower. I will personally go to the Yuntian Tower to find out what happened. Yu knew that the matter was urgent and didn't dare to delay. But to the public, tell the public that I am still in seclusion at the Phoenix Temple. In this way, no one would suspect anything. Yi Zhao had a lot of thoughts in his mind. Now that Dumpling's situation was unknown, it was better to be careful. It would be bad if they alerted the enemy. After giving a few more instructions, Yi Zhao's figure disappeared from the spot. Yu looked at the Phoenix Shrine again, his thoughts heavy. Hopefully, Dumpling and clan leader would be able to return safely. At the same time, Mao Zhen, who was thousands of miles away, also sensed that something was wrong. After thinking for a long time, Mao Zhen also rushed to the Yuntian Tower under the cover of night. He was indebted to Rong Xiu and Chu Luiwei. Now that Zi Chen's aura had suddenly disappeared, he naturally couldn't sit by and do nothing. Within the Divine Ruins world, undercurrents were surging. However, Chu Luiwei, who was in the Red Moon Desert, was unaware of all this. She hovered in the air and looked down at the extremely strange vortex below. Her expression gradually became serious. She turned her gaze slightly and looked at Rong Xiu for a moment. There was no need for words. The two of them already knew what the other was thinking. I didn't expect to see this scene again here, Chu Luiwei muttered softly. She still had a deep impression of the hand at the bottom of the myriad wine mountain. The mysterious existence under the vortex should be from the same sect as that hand, but there were some differences. She had wondered more than once what kind of existence could have such a terrifying pressure with just a hand. But she never had an answer. And now she slowly clenched her fists. After experiencing that calamity, she knew very well that it was very difficult to fight against it with her own strength. If it wasn't for Debeo's help at that time, thinking of this, her frown deepened. Along the way, she had summoned Debeo many times, but she never got a response. Now, she didn't know how Debeo and the other two were doing. If Debeo had suppressed the hand in Lingxiao College back then what about this? Chu Luiwei wasn't sure. An indescribable tension and irritation slowly surged from the bottom of her heart. She couldn't help but take a step forward. Suddenly, a cold and deep voice sounded in her ear. Chu Luiwei suddenly came back to her senses and looked at Rong Xiu. In the depths of his deep eyes, she could see her tiny figure. And his hand was tightly holding her wrist. Rong Xiu's sword-like eyebrows furrowed slightly. What were you thinking just now? Chu Luiwei came back to her senses and realized that she had unconsciously taken a step forward. If Rong Xiu hadn't held her back, she probably would have gone straight for the vortex. Her back was suddenly drenched in cold sweat. Just a moment ago, she was clearly thinking that this place was extremely dangerous and shouldn't be easily approached. The next moment, she actually walked forward uncontrollably. Even someone as vigilant as her was lost for a moment and almost made a mistake. Rong Xiu held her hand tightly. Step back. I'll go down and take a look. No! Chu Luiwei's first reaction was to refuse. On the one hand, the vortex was full of unknown dangers. On the other hand, Dumpling and Zichen were both her contracted magical beasts. Even if someone had to go down and check it out, it should be her. In all aspects, she was the most suitable person. Rong Xiu stepped forward and kissed her gently between her eyebrows. Be good and listen to me. His words were gentle, but his tone was firm. Chu Luiwei looked up in surprise as confusion flashed across her eyes. Rong Xiu's attitude towards this matter had always been very firm. Previously, When they were at Lingxiao College, he wouldn't let her go no matter what. It was the same this time. Although it was dangerous, they had gone through life and death together more than once. Rong Xiu didn't seem to have such a reaction when they encountered other situations in the past. Just as she was thinking, a fierce wind suddenly blew in the desert. Whoosh! The wind whistled and a thin layer of frost quickly condensed on the sand dunes. The surrounding temperature dropped rapidly and the wind was bitterly cold. Chu Liuyue's heart skipped a beat. The nights in the Red Moon Desert were always extremely cold. But this time, it seemed to be a little different. Boom! Suddenly, a roar came from the sky. Chu Liyue immediately looked up and saw a round moon in the originally dark night sky. It was faintly discernible among the layers of dark clouds. The faint moonlight shrouded the entire Red Moon Desert as if it was covered with a layer of white gauze. Then, a sharp and strange sound suddenly came from under the desert. Chu Liyue's heart skipped a beat. She immediately looked down. An eye suddenly opened. It stared at her from the abyss. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2105. It was indeed an eye. Chu Liyue was shocked. Previously, she was only guessing. However, at this moment, she clearly saw that huge eye. It was scarlet, bloody, and crazy. As if it had been suppressed for thousands of years, it carried deep resentment and coldness. Chu Liyue stared at it in a daze, and her mind went blank for a moment. Suddenly, a warm and strong hand covered her eyes, blocking everything in front of her. At the same time, she leaned back and fell into a broad and tough chest. A faint, cold fragrance permeated the air and enveloped her entire body, soothing her mind and calming her down. Rong Xiu. Chu Liyue covered Rong Xiu's hand with both hands and muttered in a low voice. Did you see it? Rong Xiu grunted, turned her around, and hugged her tightly in his arms. Don't worry, I'm here. Chu Liyue leaned in his arms, her forehead on his chest, and her vision was pitch black. She could clearly hear his strong heartbeat. She nodded, but her heart was still surging with waves. That idea was really powerful. It could bewitch people and confuse their minds without batting an eyelid. She thought that she was an extremely resilient person, but she almost fell for it because of her carelessness just now. If not for Rong Xiu, she was afraid that eye and the hand under the wine mountain belong to the same person, don't they? She asked softly. Rong Xiu nodded, one arm wrapped around her slender waist, and his chin rubbed the top of her head a few times. Her hair was soft and smooth, and it also carried the unique cold peach blossom fragrance on her body. Rong Xiu looked down. Her hair was tied up in a simple bun, and she didn't wear any extra hairpins. Only the peach blossom hairpin shone faintly in her hair. She had been wearing it ever since she got married. Rong Xiu retracted his gaze and looked at the vortex below. It should be in existence above her eminence. Chu Liyue didn't say anything. In fact, she had already guessed this. It wasn't that she hadn't seen her eminence before. Even the best of them, Yiwen Tao, had been defeated by her. However, the mysterious and powerful existence suppressed below was much more powerful than her eminence. And this was only a part of the divine body. Rong Xiu patted her shoulder gently and leaned over to her ear. His voice was low and reassuring. Wait for me. As he spoke, he loosened his arm. At the same time, a golden flame flew out from his palm. In the blink of an eye, the fire formed a barrier around Chu Liyue's body, completely trapping her in it. With a light tap of his slender and fair finger, the golden barrier retreated quite a distance. Until he was sure that she was safe, Rong Xiu looked at the vortex again. The patience and gentleness on his face completely disappeared at this moment. A layer of frost quickly climbed up his eyebrows. His deep and unfathomable eyes were even colder and more dignified. He leaped up, and in the next moment he was directly above the vortex. An astonishing force came from below, as if it was going to devour him. Rong Xiu's clothes fluttered in the strong wind. The hazy moonlight and the dark night blended together. Dressed in white, he stood in the air, sacred and noble, like a banished immortal. However, his body was cold and filled with murderous intent. From afar, he looked more like a killing god who had walked out of hell. Chu Luiwei stared at him, and for a moment she was in a daze. This Rong Xiu was obviously very familiar to her, but there seemed to be some subtle changes and it was a little unfamiliar. In fact, this wasn't the first time she had seen such a scene, and she had felt this way before. She remembered very clearly that when the unparalleled palace chased after Rong Xiu and forced him to make a move, he seemed to be like this. It was also at that time that she first knew about Rong Xiu's identity as the Holy Sun. At that time, she had not recovered her memories, but she had a deep impression of that scene. In the past, she did not pay too much attention to it. She only thought that Rong Xiu would act like this when he wanted to kill someone. He had always been decisive, cold, and ruthless in killing. Otherwise, he would not have been able to obtain the position of the Holy Sun in the Yuntian Tower, nor would he have been able to establish his reputation in the Divine Ruins world, much less reach where he was today. But for some reason, Chu Luiwei felt a strange feeling in her heart as she looked at him. Suddenly, her heart skipped a beat. Rong Xiu's current expression was very similar to their reflection in the mirror in front of the Peach Blossom Cove's enchantment. Rong Xiu flicked his wrist, and the golden flame quickly turned into a long whip. If one looked closely, they would be able to see the sharp scales and barbs on the whip. Rong Xiu lashed out with the whip. The sound of the whip breaking through the air resounded through the world and spread far and wide. At the same time, the whirlpool suddenly stopped spinning. A sharp and shrill sound came out from it. Chu Luiwei's heart skipped a beat. This sound was clearly clearer than the previous one, and it was even more chilling. Immediately after, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth seemed to be attracted by something and rushed over. The ground started to shake, as if something was about to rush out from below. A cluster of black flames rose from Rong Xiu's eyes. His eyes were cold as he waved his hand again. Several golden rays flew out quickly and lay in the middle of the whirlpool. These golden rays quickly intertwined and formed a huge net, completely enveloping the whirlpool. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2106. The screeching stopped for a moment, and the place fell into a strange silence. However, Chu Luiwei's heart still felt like it was being gripped tightly by something, because the surrounding energy of heaven and earth was still rushing towards this place. The abundant energy was like a surging river, pouring down towards the vortex. It was as if there was something in the depths of the vortex that was crazily devouring everything. The wind whistled. Chu Luiwei could still clearly see the scene in front of her through the faint golden barrier in front of her. The ground trembled, and the yellow sand flowed. The rustling sound kept echoing in her ears. Suddenly the eye blinked. Boom! The giant golden net dissipated with a loud bang. The violent energy scattered in all directions. Swoosh! A black rope suddenly flew out from below, heading straight for Chu Luiwei. Seeing this, Rong Xiu's eyes turned cold, and the golden whip in his hand turned into a ball of fire again. Then he actually crushed it with his bare hands. Bang! Following this loud bang, the ball of fire turned into countless streams of light, and then quickly formed a giant Xian formation in front of Rong Xiu. In the blink of an eye, the incomparably complicated patterns were outlined. As for the black chain, it was also blocked by the Xian formation. As if it had sensed danger, the chain quickly retreated and disappeared into the vortex again. Chu Luiwei widened her eyes in shock. So fast? It was definitely not easy to execute such a complicated Xian formation. If it was her, she probably wouldn't even be able to complete it. Suddenly, her gaze fixed. This Xian formation looked very familiar. Suddenly, a thought flashed in her mind. This was the Xian formation that was used to suppress the Thousand Wine Mountain, the Sky Shuttle formation. How did Rong Xiu execute it? In a flash, the last stream of light finally converged on it. The complete and complicated Xian formation hung in the night sky, rotating quietly and shining brilliantly. An indescribable pressure and aura spread from it. Even Chu Luiwei, who was standing far away and separated by a layer of barrier, felt a little stuffy. She gasped in shock. Rong Xiu was actually able to use the formation in such a short time. Could it be that he had already broken through to the great Grandmaster realm? Without waiting for Chu Luiwei to ask in detail, Rong Xiu's figure moved. He leaped up and stepped on the huge golden Xian formation. Boom! Driven by this power, the formation began to descend. This speed seemed slow, but wherever the profound formation passed, large swathes of space would collapse one after another. Everything was quickly destroyed, as if it was nothing more than rotten wood. The distance between the Xian formation and the vortex was constantly shortening, and the power of both sides had also started to crazily slaughter each other. However, the profound formation still gradually gained the upper hand and destroyed the power below bit by bit. Finally, the golden array landed on the ground and sealed off the vortex. The surrounding heaven and earth energy no longer surged towards the center, dissipating separately. That shrill shriek was quickly extinguished as well. The yellow sand that had surged out earlier was now flowing back. Chu Luiwei stood in the air and saw everything. She was almost in awe. It had only been a short while, but the situation had taken a 180-degree turn. And all of this was because of Rong Xiu. Her gaze turned slightly and landed on Rong Xiu. He stood in midair. After a fierce battle, there wasn't even a speck of dirt on his snow-white robe. If she had not seen it with her own eyes, it would have been hard to believe that he could use the sky shuttle formation so easily. One had to know that even the entire Lingxiao College's elders were helpless when they joined forces. If not for Debao's help, Chu Luiwei would definitely not have succeeded. Furthermore, she was only repairing the sky shuttle formation at that time. Just this alone almost cost her half her life. And now, Rong Xiu completely relied on his own strength to directly use it. A doubt once again welled up in Chu Luiwei's heart. How strong was Rong Xiu? She originally thought that after this period of experience, she should be able to compete with Rong Xiu. But once the sky shuttle formation was used, she understood that there was still a considerable gap between them. She had no idea when he had broken through, and there were no signs at all. As if sensing Chu Luiwei's gaze, Rong Xiu suddenly turned his head and looked over. A ball of black flame flashed in his eyes. However, because there was a distance between the two of them, and Chu Luiwei was blocked by the golden barrier in front of her, she could not see this point. Rong Xiu looked back. Under the suppression of the sky shuttle formation, the whirlpool was gradually shrinking, and the movement below was also fading away little by little. His figure moved, and he came in front of Chu Luiwei. He lifted his wrist slightly, and the golden barrier dissipated. Chu Luiwei looked at him with a complicated expression, and for a moment, she did not know what to say. Seeing the shock in her eyes, Rong Xiu's thoughts moved slightly, but his expression was normal. "Oh, what's wrong?" Chu Luiwei opened her mouth and pointed downwards. "That's the sky shuttle formation?" Rong Xiu nodded. "You? When did you learn it? Also, this level of Xian formation, how did you—" Rong Xiu's thin lips curved slightly and he smiled. "When you were repairing the sky shuttle formation, I looked at it for a while." Chu Luiwei stared at him in disbelief. This meant that he only looked at it once that day and he learned it? But, before it was repaired, the sky shuttle formation was incomplete. After it was repaired, the sky shuttle formation was quickly used to suppress the Thousand Wine Mountain. The complete sky shuttle formation did not appear for long. "It's enough." Rong Xiu's voice was as low and calm as usual, as if he was talking about something that had nothing to do with him. Chu Luiwei choked. Looking at Rong Xiu's calm appearance, she was speechless for a moment. She now vaguely understood how others felt when they looked at her. It was really infuriating to compare oneself to others. At this moment, a strange sound came from below. Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu looked up at the same time, and saw that the vortex suddenly began to shrink at an astonishing speed. The surrounding yellow sand kept surging in, as if it was going to be completely flattened. Chu Luiwei's heart suddenly sank. Dumpling and Zichen are still down there. She originally thought that Rong Xiu would force the other party to send Dumpling and Zichen out, but she never expected the other party to be so stubborn. Rong Xiu's expression turned cold, and he immediately shouted in a deep voice. "Explode! Boom! Boom!" The power of the sky shuttle formation instantly surged to the center, then condensed into a ball of flame and suddenly exploded. Suddenly, the ground shook violently. Yellow sand flew everywhere. A huge pit had appeared beneath the sky shuttle array. It was empty inside. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2107. Chu Luwei had a bad feeling. Almost at the same time, Rong Xiu attacked again. On the sky shuttle array, several fireballs exploded one after another. Boom, boom, boom. With several earth-shattering explosions, a deep gully appeared in the vast desert. However, under the yellow sand, there was still yellow sand. Other than that, there was nothing. Rong Xiu frowned. Chu Luwei was stunned for a moment, then immediately realized that something was wrong. Dumpling and Zichen had probably been swept away by the other party. She moved her feet and went straight down to the gully. Dumpling! Zichen! She shouted as she searched. Gradually, her body was enveloped by a chill. The connection between them and her had been forcefully cut off. She couldn't sense their existence at all. The most important thing was that strange and gloomy aura had disappeared without a trace. It was as if the eye in the vortex abyss had never appeared. She stood in the deep gully. Because the flow had stopped, the yellow sand under her feet was covered with frost again. Other than that, there was nothing in front or behind her. She clenched her fists and muttered in a low voice, "It ran away just like that." Rong Xiu quickly rushed over and frowned. After checking back and forth a few times, he finally said, "It didn't run away. It just hid." Chu Luwei turned to look at him. "Really?" Rong Xiu nodded. Although the sky shuttle array didn't completely kill it, it was still seriously injured. Under such circumstances, it couldn't have escaped. Besides, he paused. Besides, it's very likely that it has been here for a long time. It won't leave so easily. Chu Luwei hesitated at first, but then she remembered the hand at the foot of Lingxiao College's mountain of wine and immediately believed it. What Rong Xiu said was indeed very likely. That thing was very strange. It had probably been suppressed for many years. But, if that's really the case, why did Debao and the others ignore it and allow it to exist? Rong Xiu glanced at her darkly. Did you forget that the thing at the foot of the Thousand Wine Mountain is the same? Chu Luwei fell silent. That's right. If Debao and the others could deal with that thing directly, they would definitely not be merciful. But they didn't. I wonder if there are other difficulties. Moreover, Debao and the others had not given any response since Dumpling's disappearance. Thinking of this, Chu Luwei turned and left. I want to see Debao and the others. In this Crimson Moon Desert, the three of them were practically existences that ruled over everything. Chu Luwei did not believe that they were unaware of this. No matter what reason they had for not intervening, she had to personally ask them. It would be best if they could help. If they couldn't, even if she had to flip the entire Crimson Moon Desert over, she would find Dumpling and Zichen. Rong Xiu's lips moved slightly, but he hesitated. He knew her temperament the best. She would never give up easily when she planned to do something. Moreover, everything that happened today had really crossed her bottom line. He stepped forward. I'll be with you. She's coming. She's coming. Diu Zhangze was anxious. Dumpling and Zichen are missing. How are we going to explain this? Debao, say something. Dugu Mabao sat cross-legged with no expression on his face. Hearing this, he only frowned slightly and said coldly, noisy. Diu Zhangze pointed at his nose in disbelief. I'm noisy? Wasn't I forced to do this? Debao, get it straight. What time is it now? You? Is here to ask for an explanation. What are you going to do? You pretended to be dead before. You can't be pretending to be dead now, right? Hey, you're not really going to pretend that nothing happened, are you? How can that girl be dealt with so easily? Lan Xiao, who was leaning against the wall, said impatiently, Diu, can you calm down? You're really noisy. Diu Zhangze took a deep breath. Lan Xiao, you're on the same side as Debao now? Lan Xiao sneered and turned over. I can't be bothered. But he's not anxious, so why are you so anxious? Even if you is looking for trouble, It should be his turn first, right? Dugumabao was the only one with a divine body among the three of them. Lan Shao crossed his legs. Even if the sky falls, he should be the first to hold it up. Although he's only a little bit now, it doesn't matter. We're underground. Dugumabao glared daggers at him. Lan Shao didn't care. He was telling the truth. So what? Diwu Zhangzi couldn't be bothered with the two of them. After so many years, they were still as unreliable as ever. You spent a lot of effort on Dumpling and Zichen along the way and doted on them like treasures. Now that something has happened, if she makes a scene, no one can escape. Diwu Zhangzi was so angry that he sat down. Let's see what you're going to do. As soon as he said that, a familiar voice sounded. Debao. It was Chu Luiyue. Dugumabao's expression changed slightly. Debao. I have something to ask you. If it's convenient, can you meet me? Beside the lake, Chu Luiyue looked at the calm lake in front of her and knitted her brows. Before he could finish, Dugumabao appeared in front of him again. Speak. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath. You know what happened just now? Dugumabao nodded. Yes. Chu Luiyue immediately said. Then can you help? No. Dugumabao interrupted him. The three of us will definitely not fight him head-on. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2108. In that case, the three of them did know about the existence of the eye underground. Why? Chu Luiyue took a step forward and asked with a frown. Dugumabao looked at her indifferently. There's no reason. But back then at Lingshao Academy, you were the one who did it, Dugumabao said firmly. Chu Luiyue was stunned. Only then did she remember that although Debao helped secretly at that time, he did not show up from the beginning to the end. In the Divine Ruins world, he seemed to be unwilling to do anything publicly. He even refused to admit this matter. Her mind raced and then she asked, then, the whereabouts of Dumpling and Zichen, they're still here. Dugumabao raised his chin and his expression was slightly serious. All I can tell you is that it can't leave the Red Moon Desert. Chu Luiyue's eyebrows twitched. That's right. Of course, this was compared to Debao and the other two. Could it be? Was it related to that thing that trapped them here? Whether or not you can find Dumpling and Zichen depends on you. As Dugumabao spoke, he turned around and was about to leave. After taking a step, he suddenly stopped. I'll be in seclusion during this period of time. Diwu and Lan Shao will be busy with the divine body and won't come out much. Everything, you can do as you see fit. With that, he walked forward. The lake water parted, and his figure quickly disappeared. A moment later, the lake water returned to calm. A gentle breeze blew, only causing faint ripples. Chu Luiyue stood in place for a long time. At this time, the sky was about to brighten, and a ray of white appeared on the horizon. From afar, the faint layer of frost that had condensed during the night was quietly melting. Quiet and desolate. Rong Xiu walked over, stood beside her, and held her hand. Chu Luiyue turned around and said, It seems that I can only find them myself. I'll go with you. Fortunately, it won't leave the Red Moon Desert. This is much better than expected. Chu Luiyue heaved a long sigh of relief. Rong Xiu glanced at the surface of the lake, which was gradually calming down. Not angry? Chu Luiyue's lips curved up slightly as she shook her head. How could that be? Actually, Debao's refusal to help was within her expectations. So when she heard his answer, she was not surprised or dissatisfied. I know how they treat me. Clearly, there was another reason for this. Chu Luiyue had no idea who had trapped Debao and the other two in the Red Moon Desert. But now, she had a vague feeling that she had discovered something. The hand under the Thousand Wine Mountain and the eye under the Red Moon Desert, obviously, it was related to this. If we can find Dumpling and Zichen, we might be able to help them. Chu Luiyue didn't finish his sentence. She turned around and looked at the vast desert behind her. Where exactly was that eye hidden? Dugumabao returned to the dark and cramped cage. Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Shao looked over. Rong Xiu has already asked what you wanted to ask. Dugumabao said calmly. You heard Yu's answer. From the beginning, he was not worried that she would find trouble with them because of this matter. Because she had always been extremely smart. Diu Zhangzi sighed with a complicated expression and said emotionally, I really didn't dote on her for nothing. Dumpling and Zichen were very important to her. Now that they were suddenly missing, one could imagine the worry and anxiety in her heart. In comparison, Dugu Mabao's words seemed a little unreasonable. But fortunately, that girl was very open-minded about these things. The Red Moon Desert won't be peaceful for a period of time. I've already told her that we won't interfere. You mean, no matter what happens in the future, we'll just watch from here? Lan Xiao asked. Dugu Maba looked at him expressionlessly. Other than watching, what else can you do now? In his current state, even if it was the day of the red moon, he wouldn't have the strength to go out. Lan Xiao choked. He wanted to defend himself, but Dugu Mabao was speaking the truth. He really couldn't think of anything to refute him. In the end, he could only harumph fiercely. When my divine body is reconstructed, I'll come out and fight with you. Dugu Mabao sat down. With a move of his palm, a Xian formation appeared in front of him. This Xian formation was very different from ordinary Xian formations. There was an unusually bright light spot on it. Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Xiao were stunned when they saw his actions. Big Bao, what are you doing? Diwu Zhangzi subconsciously straightened his body. His expression was solemn as he lowered his voice and asked. Dugu Mabao said calmly, Of course, I'm opening the gate realm. You're crazy. Lan Xiao suddenly sat up. Because of the shock, his half-recovered face looked a little ferocious. The Red Moon Desert and the Divine Ruins world are connected by a door realm. That door realm is also an extremely secret place. You're opening the door realm now to attract those people from the Divine Ruins world? Dugu Mabao said, As long as we don't go out, they have no reason to come in. Lan Xiao choked. Although that was the case, these door realms had never been opened for many years. Even when they sent you to the Divine Ruins world, they took a detour and went through Peach Blossom Cove. But now, you want to attract other people from the Divine Ruins world? Diwu Zhangzi suddenly realized something and asked in surprise. Dugu Mabao nodded. Of course, she's not a match for that thing alone. Even if Rong Xiu is here, it won't be easy to deal with it. If more people come to help, maybe we'll have a better chance of winning. Diwu Zhangzi and Lan Xiao looked at each other and were silent for a long time. Dugu Mabao's actions were equivalent to directly exposing them to danger. And all of this was for you. Although he said that he wasn't willing to help, he actually made such a decision secretly. Since you've already decided, we naturally have no objections. Diwu Zhangzi nodded and sighed again. I only hope that all these things can be resolved before the next dangerous month. Lan Xiao suddenly turned around and closed his eyes. A ball of fire jumped in his palm. Diwu Zhangzi asked curiously, Lan Xiao, what are you doing? Lan Xiao didn't even open his eyes and only snorted softly. Naturally, I'm reconstructing the divine body. Dugu Mabao isn't the only one who can help you. This time, we have to succeed no matter what. Dugu Mabao glanced at him, then quickly retracted his gaze and looked at the Xian formation in front of him. For a long time, this door realm had never been opened. But this time, he couldn't care so much. A faint glow shone on his face, making his purple eyes look even more demonic. Then, he raised his hand and lightly tapped on the Xian formation. Bang! A faint sound came from the Xian formation. That spot of light quickly spread out. At the same time, the Divine Ruins world shook. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2109. Yi Zhao, who had just arrived outside the Yuntian Tower, was shocked. He quickly turned his head and looked in the direction of the commotion. In the distant horizon, a ripple suddenly appeared on the curtain of light that fell from the sky. As the ripple moved, the energy between heaven and earth was greatly affected and surged along with it. Whoosh, a sound like a surging tide entered one's ears and shook one's heart. Yi Zhao's eyes flashed with deep shock. He said in disbelief, This is... Suddenly, the void not far away fluctuated, and a figure walked out of it. Yi Zhao immediately looked at the person warily. When he saw the other party's face clearly, his expression froze. Mao Zhen rushed over and did not expect to meet an acquaintance. The two looked at each other for a moment, and the atmosphere was a little strange. The relationship between the two ancient divine beasts, the crimson gold celestial phoenix and the great phoenix dragon, had always been very subtle. In all aspects, these two families were on equal footing. However, they were extremely proud in their bones, and there were all kinds of comparisons between them, both overtly and covertly. However, because Chu Luiwei had contracted Dumpling and Zichen respectively, these two families were once again involved. Therefore, it was somewhat awkward to meet now. However, Mao Zhen was strong and was the first to react. He greeted with a smile. "Clan leader Yi Zhao, I didn't expect to meet you here. What a coincidence." Yi Zhao looked at him expressionlessly and said bluntly, "It's a coincidence. We're both here to look for someone in the Yuntian Tower." Mao Zhen was a little surprised that his purpose was exposed. Then he realized that something was wrong. His expression turned serious. Could it be? The two looked at each other again. They were powerful beings who had lived for thousands of years. Moreover, these two were very shrewd. Therefore, they quickly understood something with just one look. Mao Zhen frowned and asked, "To be honest, I've cut off contact with Zichen." Yi Zhao paused. "Same for Dumpling." The two of them fell silent, and the air seemed to have frozen at this moment. If it was only Dumpling or Zichen who had temporarily lost contact with them, it would be fine. But now, the two of them had disappeared together. This made people think more about it. Mao Zhen immediately said, "Let's go to the Yuntian Tower and ask." Just as he was about to make his move, a strange sound echoed from the distance. "Hula!" He was taken aback and turned his head to look. Only then did he see that there were two wrinkles on the light screen in the distance. And that sound just now was the surging energy of heaven and earth. "How?" Mao Zhen was stunned for a moment. Yi Zhao said in a deep voice, "As you can see, another gate realm has opened." "How is this possible?" Mao Zhen subconsciously retorted. The gate realm of the Divine Ruins realm appeared together with the curtain of light tens of thousands of years ago. It was not changed by any external force. Why is there an extra one now? The first-rate families and clans in the Divine Ruins realm more or less controlled a certain number of gate realms. And this was also a symbol of their status. Only those with real power and combat strength could occupy the gate realms and be responsible for guarding them. However, the gate realms were not opened by these people. They had existed since the birth of heaven and earth. Yi Zhao said, "You and I both saw it with our own eyes. No matter how impossible it is, it has already happened." Mao Zhen looked over in a daze. In the distance, the screen of light was rippling like the surface of water being blown by the wind. It was indeed forming a new world of gates. Suddenly, something flashed through his mind. Rumor has it that the mysterious existence above the God realm can completely control a gate realm. Could it be? But in the Divine Ruins realm, there had not been such an expert for tens of thousands of years. What exactly was going on now? Yi Zhao clenched his hands behind his back and said word by word, "This shocking change will be known by the entire Divine Ruins realm." The commotion was too big. No matter who it was, as long as they looked up, they would immediately see this scene. Something is wrong with this gate realm. Mao Zhen frowned. Dumpling and Zichen had suddenly lost contact with them, and now something like this had happened one after another. Although these two matters seemed to be unrelated on the surface, he had an intuition in his heart that there must be some kind of connection between these two matters. Yi Zhao did not say anything. Actually, he had the same idea as Mao Zhen. With such a sudden occurrence, the entire Divine Ruins realm would probably be in chaos. At this moment, the barrier of the Yuntian Tower opened behind the two of them, and a person walked out. The two of them turned around and saw that it was 36 respected Elder Ming. 36 respected Elder Ming bowed politely to the two of them. "I didn't know that the two of you would be here. Please forgive me for not going out to welcome you." Although his seniority was very high in front of these two people, he was still far from being able to compare to them. 36 respected Elder Ming asked while muttering in his heart, "I wonder what day it is today," but the two of them actually came together. After receiving the news, he immediately rushed over, afraid that he would neglect them. Mao Zhen went straight to the point. "Where are Rong Xiao and you are now?" 36 respected Elder Ming was stunned. As expected, they were here for the two of them. But looking at Mao Zhen and Yi Zhao's expressions, something seemed wrong. He hesitated for a moment and said, "His Highness and Her Highness have left for some time." Previously, they only said that they were going out of the Divine Ruins realm, but they didn't say anything else. The two of them could come and go freely, so they did not explain in detail to 36 respected Elder Ming. As expected, they were not at the Yuntian Tower. Mao Zhen and Yi Zhao exchanged glances, then turned around and headed straight for the Gate Realm. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2110. Sigh. 36 respected Elder Ming did not expect the two of them to leave just like that. Just as he shouted, the two of them were already far away. He opened his mouth and swallowed the rest of his words. What were they doing? Who didn't know that the relationship between these two ancient divine beast tribes had always been in a delicate balance? Both sides rarely appeared together, let alone the tribe leader. The last time they came together, it was because of Rong Xiao and Chu Liuyue's wedding. What was the reason this time? Furthermore, he had actually left after asking a single question. 36 respected Elder Ming was puzzled when he suddenly saw a strange scene in the sky from the corner of his eye. He took a closer look and was instantly stunned. When he realized what had happened, he immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. A new gate realm has appeared. And that was also the direction Yi Zhao and Zizhen had headed in. 36 respected Elder Ming turned around without hesitation. The Divine Ruins world was about to change. It was not just Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen. When the strange ripples appeared on the light screen in the sky, countless people in the Divine Ruins world were shocked. Countless cultivators rushed over from all directions without hesitation. A new gate realm had suddenly opened. It was definitely not for no reason. This time, they did not just want to seize the gate realm. They also wanted to see what was hidden behind this matter. For a time, the entire Divine Ruins world was shaken. Red Moon Desert. The sun was high in the sky. Chu Liyue looked up. At this moment, she was extremely glad that she had already condensed a divine body. Even if she stayed here day and night, it would not be too torturous. The only thing that troubled her was that they had already searched here for 3 days, but they still could not find any traces of Dumpling and Zichen. Previously, she could still vaguely sense a familiar aura at the vortex. Now, there were no clues at all. The Red Moon Desert was vast. Finding them was like finding a needle in a haystack. Not to mention, there was that strange eye causing trouble. This made it even more difficult for them to find them. She stopped in her tracks. If we continue to search like this, I'm afraid there won't be any progress. After that day, the eye disappeared without a trace and never appeared again. Just as Dabao had said, this was that thing's territory. It was more familiar with this place, so it naturally had the upper hand. If the other party did not take the initiative to appear, they did not know how long it would take for them to find him. Moreover, he might not succeed. Rong Xiao frowned. There's been no movement from the Sky Shuttle formation. After Dumpling and Zichen disappeared, Rong Xiao decided to leave the Sky Shuttle array behind, even though he couldn't find them. Even now, the ravine seemed to have returned to normal, but in reality, the Sky Shuttle formation was buried under the sand. Once there were any fluctuations, he would immediately sense it. Chu Liyue sighed. That thing is very cunning. It will definitely not appear in the near future. She narrowed her eyes and fell into deep thought. Rong Xiao, who do you think that thing's target is? Rong Xiao raised his eyes slightly and looked at her quietly. What do you mean? I have a feeling that it's not targeting Dumpling and Zichen. Its real target seems to be the... Chu Liyue rested her chin on one hand, frowned, and gently stroked her chin. Why do you suddenly have such a thought? Rong Xiao asked faintly. Chu Liyue shook her head. It's not all of a sudden. In fact, she had vaguely sensed this from the moment she saw the eye. Previously at Lingxiao College, she rushed into the spring of Thousand Wine Mountain and accidentally touched the seal on that hand, which led to everything that happened later. Even though everything had calmed down, the scene from that day still vividly appeared in her mind. When she saw the eye, she clearly felt that she was being targeted. At the very beginning, that strange vortex had indeed appeared under her feet. She had jumped several times in the middle, but she could not get rid of it. In the end, Rong Xiao had to intervene to solve it. However, not long after, Dumpling and Zichen were in trouble. They were her contracted magical beasts, so it was normal for them to be implicated. Chu Luiyue fell into deep thought. Was it because of that hand, or was it because she had something on her that the other party wanted? Suddenly, there was the sound of something piercing through the air. Chu Luiyue and Rong Xiao turned around simultaneously and saw two figures running towards them, one after the other. They were extremely fast and arrived in front of the two in the blink of an eye. "You are indeed here." Chu Luiyue looked at the two people who suddenly appeared in front of her with a look of surprise. "Senior Yi Zhao, Senior Mao Zhen? Why are you together?" As soon as she asked the question, she immediately realized something. "Are you here because of Dumpling and Zichen?" Yi Zhao nodded and immediately asked. "The connection between me and Tuanzi was suddenly broken. Do you know what happened?" Chu Luiyue's heart sank. She originally thought that Dumpling had just lost contact with her, but who knew this was troublesome. "To tell you the truth, seniors, I can't get in touch with the two of them right now." "How is that possible?" Yi Zhao's expression froze. Chu Luiyue was contracted to them. How could this happen? Chu Luiyue immediately explained the situation briefly. "That's what happened. For the past few days, Rong Xiao and I have been constantly looking for them, but..." Yi Zhao's face completely darkened. Mao Zhen suddenly asked. "Where are we?" "Red Moon Desert," Chu Luiyue said. "It's also the territory of the Tianling dynasty." Mao Zhen shook her head and stared intently behind Chu Luiyue. "No. Look behind you." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2111. Chu Luiyue turned around and was immediately shocked. At the end of the vast desert, a palace had appeared at some point in time. The palace was shrouded in a layer of faint white mist and could not be seen clearly. One could only barely make out a rough outline, but its specific appearance could not be distinguished. In front of the palace, a stone door stood tall, and a plaque hung above it. Unfortunately, the words on it were covered by the white mist and could not be seen. However, even so, one could still feel its indescribable dignity and majesty. It stood quietly between heaven and earth, like a creeping giant beast, waiting to ambush and devour everything at any time. Chu Luiyue stared intently. For a moment, she was actually unable to tell whether it was an illusory shadow or a real existence. But she and Rong Xiao clearly did not see anything just now. Why did this strange palace suddenly appear after Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen arrived? Mao Zhen asked, why would such a palace appear in the Red Moon Desert? Chu Luiyue was momentarily speechless and did not know how to answer. The Red Moon Desert was indeed the territory of the Tianling dynasty. Back then, in order to pacify the great desolate swamp, she had personally led an army here and fought several bitter battles. As for the Red Moon Desert, she had been here more than once. In total, the time she had spent here could not be considered short. But even so, she had never seen such a situation. After a moment, she shook her head. "I don't know either." Mao Zhen was somewhat surprised. He originally thought that Chu Luiyue should be quite familiar with this place. But judging from her reaction, it was clearly her first time seeing this palace. Then, he hesitated and asked, "Do you know how the two of us got here?" Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment. This question? With Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen's strength, wouldn't it be a simple matter to come here? As if seeing through her thoughts, Mao Zhen laughed bitterly and said, "It seems that you still don't know that a new door has appeared in the Divine Ruins world." Chu Luiyue reacted for a while before he understood what he meant. His eyes widened in surprise. However, what Mao Zhen said next shocked her even more. "The two of us came from that gate realm." "What?" Chu Luiyue almost suspected that he had misheard. "You mean, you and Senior Yi Zhao came here directly after crossing the Dao Gate realm?" Mao Zhen nodded. "Not bad." Chu Luiwei subconsciously looked at Yizhao. Although the latter did not say anything, his expression said it all. If both of them said the same thing, then everything would be confirmed. Chu Luiwei's lips moved slightly, but his heart was in turmoil. She knew that she could go to the Divine Ruins world from the Red Moon Desert. After all, she had gone to the Peach Blossom Cove from here. But the situation of these two was clearly different. Yizhao said in a deep voice, "Now, everyone in the Divine Ruins world should already know about the existence of the Dao Gate realm. And because of the sudden appearance of the Dao Gate realm, it will definitely arouse the curiosity of many people and cause them to come." As he spoke, he looked up at the illusory palace in the sky. If they also see this scene, I'm afraid it will be even more troublesome. This was the first time such a thing had happened in 10,000 years. Who wouldn't want to pass through the Gate realm to investigate? Although this so-called Scarlet Moon Desert was outside of the Divine Ruins world, the palace was clearly an extraordinary existence. Chu Luiwei pursed her lips as countless thoughts flashed through her mind. Of course, she had thought of Yizhao's worries. But these things happened too coincidentally. Did it have anything to do with Dabao and the others? Mao Zhen narrowed his eyes and said with some uncertainty, "Could Zichen and the others be in that palace?" According to what Chu Luiwei had said, that's strange I couldn't leave the Red Moon Desert. And after Dumpling and Zichen were taken away, such a strange palace appeared. It was inevitable that people would connect the dots. Chu Luiwei pondered for a moment. There's no point in guessing here. Why don't we take a look ourselves? She was also filled with doubts about the palace that had suddenly appeared and was about to go over to investigate. It would be best if she could find Dumpling and Zichen. A cold glint flashed across Rong Xiu's deep phoenix eyes. His thin lips parted slightly. Just as he was about to speak, he suddenly sensed something and his gaze froze. Immediately after, the space in front of Chu Luiwei trembled and two more figures walked out. Seeing them, Chu Luiwei was rather surprised. "Xin Yi, little Zhou?" Xin Yi took a step forward and cupped his fists. "Greetings, Master, Your Highness." Then he looked up slightly and saw Yizhao and Mao Zhen behind Chu Luiwei. A hint of surprise flashed in his eyes, but it quickly disappeared as he greeted the two of them politely and respectfully. "Greetings, clan heads." Chang Wanzhou was behind him, but he was as silent as usual. Chu Luiwei's gaze swept across the two of them. "Why you here?" Xin Yi paused. "Ever since you left Peach Blossom Cove, this subordinate has been feeling uneasy. After thinking about it, this subordinate decided to come over and investigate." This explanation was a little vague, but Chu Luiwei didn't pursue the matter. Xin Yi was extremely capable, especially after his rebirth. He was even more concerned about her safety. It was normal for him to sense that something was wrong and come here. However, Chu Luiwei didn't expect him to bring Chang Wanzhou over. Although the two of them knew each other, they weren't close. Xin Yi didn't even bring the other members of the 13U Empire, but he only brought Chang Wanzhou. It was really a little unusual. However, this wasn't the time to ask about this. She said, "Don't worry. We're fine. It's just that Dumpling and Zichen are missing. However, you came at the right time. We were planning to go over and take a look. Perhaps we can find them." Xin Yi and Chang Wanzhou followed her gaze and saw a majestic and mysterious palace standing between heaven and earth in the distant horizon. Because their backs were facing each other, Chu Luiwei didn't see the change in Xin Yi's eyes. When he turned back to look at Chu Luiwei again, his expression had already returned to normal. Xin Yi hesitated for a moment and asked, "Master, that place is strange." "Master, that place looks very strange. It might be dangerous. Are you sure you want to go?" Chu Luiwei looked at him strangely. It wasn't Xin Yi's first day following her. All these years, what kind of dangerous place hadn't she been to? Who knew how many life and death situations she had encountered? Why did he suddenly ask this time? She nodded without batting an eyelid. This might be the only chance to find Dumpling and Zichen. She had to go. Xin Yi glanced at her and quickly lowered his head. "Then this subordinate will accompany you." Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2112. Contrary to Chu Liuyue's expectations, after Zhen Yi asked that question, he didn't stop her. Instead, he directly agreed. It was as if that question just now was just a casual question out of worry. However, Chu Liyue knew Zhen Yi very well. He never spoke nonsense. But since he had already said so, Chu Liyue couldn't be bothered to pursue the matter. The most important thing was to find out what was going on over there. She nodded slightly. Just be careful. With that, she walked forward. Just as she took a step forward, someone approached her from the side. Rong Xiu walked to her side and held her hand. Chu Liyue felt slightly relieved, and the corners of her lips curled up slightly. Just like that, the group walked towards the palace. Chang Wanzhou stared at the palace and vaguely felt a headache coming on. He rubbed his temples, suppressed these thoughts, and followed them. These people were all very powerful, so their speed was also extremely fast. However, the distance between them and the palace seemed to be the same as before. 2 hours later, Chu Liyue realized that the distance between them and the palace seemed to be the same as before. There were no changes at all. Sand dunes rose and fell continuously. As far as the eye could see, there was nothing but scorching sand. As Chu Liyue walked, she kept recalling the various ancient books she had read in the past. The Red Moon Desert had always been very mysterious to the world. Since ancient times, there had been very few rumors related to it. Chu Liyue had flipped through almost all the books in the Tianling royal family, but the contents she had read were very few. As for the books in the Divine Ruins world, needless to say, they had nothing to do with this place. Even if she racked her brains, she still couldn't figure out what kind of existence this palace was. After thinking for a while, she still couldn't find an answer. She gently squeezed Rong Xiu's hand and asked in a low voice, "Rong Xiu, do you know what's going on?" Rong Xiu paused and shook his head. Chu Liyue felt a little regretful. Even you don't know. As far as she knew, Rong Xiu was almost omniscient. He was always aware of many secrets that the outside world had never heard of. She had thought that she would be able to get something out of him. Rong Xiu glanced at her. Her eyebrows were slightly furrowed, and her thick and long eyelashes trembled slightly. Evidently, this matter puzzled her greatly. He said, "Perhaps we'll know when we get there." Chu Liyue nodded. Suddenly, she stopped in her tracks and looked to her right. A few figures suddenly appeared. Chu Liyue saw a familiar figure. The group of people quickly noticed the presence of Chu Liuyue's group. The young woman in the lead was stunned at first, but then she revealed a joyful expression. "Why are you guys here?" Chu Liyue smiled. "Senior Sister Ru, long time no see." These people had come from the meteor sect. The woman in the lead was Shiru. Shiru quickly walked over. She blushed when she heard Chu Liuyue's words. "We entered the academy at almost the same time. So, I don't dare to be called senior sister." Shiru hadn't been familiar with Chu Liyue in the past. However, she had been very grateful to Chu Liyue ever since she had saved her life. So, she had always been very close to her. "All right, I haven't thanked you for the list of medicinal ingredients." Shiru suddenly remembered something and said. She was talking about Chu Liuyue's agreement to do a medicinal ingredient business with the meteor sect. She hadn't been clear about it at first, but she had inquired about it later. There were many aristocratic families and sects that wanted to establish a relationship with the Peach Blossom Cove. However, Chu Liyue had only accepted the orders of a few of them, and the meteor sect was one of them. "I had always wanted to personally visit and thank you, but I thought that you wouldn't have much time recently. So, I put it aside for the time being. I didn't expect that I would meet you here." Shiru explained. Everyone in the Divine Ruins world knew that Chu Liyue had occupied the Peach Blossom Cove and established the Yu residence. Now, even those first-rate aristocratic families and sects had to respectfully address her as Mistress Yu when they saw her. Shiru looked at Chu Liyue in front of her and sighed in her heart. Who would have thought that she would become such a person who could stir up such a storm in such a short time? Even though she knew that Chu Liyue wasn't an ordinary person, her speed and boldness still shocked her. Chu Liyue didn't seem to mind and smiled. "That's not important. But why are you here all of a sudden?" Shiru blinked her eyes. We're here because of the same reason as you. Chu Luiyue was stunned for a moment. Then she quickly reacted. You mean because of the newly appeared Gate Realm? Shi suddenly realized something. You, aren't you? Chu Luiyue smiled helplessly. To tell you the truth, we've been here for more than half a month. We only just found out about the Gate Realm. Shi nodded in understanding. Yes, Chu Luiyue wasn't from the Divine Ruins world. What a coincidence! Shi's lips curled into a smile. There was a hint of excitement in her words. This trip is really worth it. Huh? What do you mean? Shi looked surprised. You still don't know? The news has spread throughout the Divine Ruins world. Everyone is saying that the secret to breaking through Her Eminence's shackles is hidden behind the newly opened Gate Realm. Chu Luiyue frowned. What did you say? Shi pointed at the palace on the horizon. She had noticed it when they had just arrived. I heard that the secret is hidden in that palace. You should also know that no one in the Divine Ruins world has crossed that threshold for 10,000 years. This time, the Gate Realm has appeared due to a change in the heavens. We're not the only ones. Countless powerhouses in the Divine Ruins world are coming here. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 2113. Chu Luiyue didn't expect that so many things would happen in such a short period of time. According to Shi, all the aristocratic families and clans in the Divine Ruins world had already received this rumor. Moreover, they believed it to be true and rushed here one after another. The people of the world were already yearning to break through to the Supreme God Realm. Now that a new door had suddenly appeared, they naturally wanted to investigate it. If it was fake, they would have made a wasted trip at most. They wouldn't have lost anything. But what if it was true? Even if the possibility was extremely small, they still wouldn't give up this opportunity. Chu Luiyue turned her head and looked. Sure enough, she saw people appearing in the distance one after another. After seeing the palace at the end of the horizon, these people's faces revealed an excited expression. Then, they rushed over one after another. More and more people were gathering in the desert. Chu Luiyue's thoughts were surging. At this time, she was basically sure that Dabao and the others were behind this. However, she didn't expect that they were in control of such a secret door. She had come to the Red Moon Desert many times, but she had never seen it. She didn't know what they were planning to do this time. Shi saw that she was lost in thought. So she urged her. We have to hurry up. Otherwise, others will beat us to it. Chu Luiyue raised her head and smiled. You're right. We have to go there as soon as possible. Since we've met, let's go together. Shi's eyes lit up. Okay. Actually, she had wanted to say this when she saw Chu Luiyue and the others. If we go together, we can take care of each other. She winked at Chu Luiyue. I've brought the most powerful elders of the Meteor sect with me this time. Chu Luiyue's gaze swept over the people behind her. They were all Supreme God experts. It was obvious that the Meteor sect had put in a lot of effort this time. The corners of her mouth curved slightly. That's great. Shi also took the opportunity to size up the people beside Chu Luiyue. She was very familiar with Rong Xiu. Just like before, his strength was unfathomable. As for the two young men beside her, one was calm and indifferent, and it was impossible to tell his cultivation level. The other was refined and taciturn, but it was obvious that he was in the High God realm. Her gaze finally landed on Yi Zhao and Mao Jin, and a hint of surprise flashed through her eyes. She could not discern the cultivation level of these two people, but the pressure on their bodies that could not be ignored clearly showed their strength. However, the appearances of these two people were very unfamiliar. These two are, Chu Luiyue smiled. Allow me to introduce you. This is Senior Yi Zhao, and this is Senior Mao Jin. Shi was stunned for a moment when she heard his clear and relaxed voice. Then her eyes slowly widened. You mean Yi Zhao? Mao Jin? It couldn't be the two she was thinking of, right? Chu Luiyue explained. These two seniors also sensed that something was wrong with the Gate Realm, so they came here first. Shi gasped. It's really them. The leaders of two ancient divine beast clans are here at the same time. Because she was too shocked, even the usually polite Shuru lost her composure for a moment. Her mind went blank for a while, and she opened her mouth, but did not know what to say. The gods behind her also couldn't hide their shock and hurriedly said, "That's right. Greetings, Leader Yizhao and Leader Maojin." Only then did Shuru come back to her senses, and she hurriedly followed suit and bowed. Yizhao was expressionless as usual, and Maojin was much more easygoing. She laughed. "Don't be so polite, everyone. We came here for a reason. Since you has decided to go with you, we will help each other more in the future." Her words were very polite and amiable. Shuru and the others were flattered. "We wouldn't dare." Everyone knew that the two ancient divine beasts were very arrogant, especially the leaders of their clans. Their statuses were even more unapproachable. It was already difficult to meet them, let alone other things. Now, they could actually talk to them face to face and even become allies. No one would believe it if they told others. And all of this was thanks to Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu. After all, when the two of them got married, these two kings who had never met each other went to the Yuntian Tower to celebrate. Everyone in the world of God knew about it. Chu Luiwei raised his chin. "Since we know each other, let's go now." The group continued to walk toward the palace. Perhaps it was because of Mao Zhen and Yi Zhao's presence, Shuru and the others were much more nervous than before. Chu Luiwei smiled helplessly in his heart, but he did not say anything. This was something that could not be helped. On one hand, Yi Zhao and Mao Zhen were famous outside, and the reverence for them was deeply ingrained in everyone's hearts. On the other hand, the two of them were powerful. Even if they deliberately restrained their aura, there was still a faint pressure. Time slowly passed, and more people appeared in the desert. Many people noticed Chu Luiwei and Rong Xiu's group. The two of them were already peerless in appearance, and they were very eye-catching wherever they stood. In addition, some people gradually recognized Mao Zhen and Yi Zhao, which attracted a lot of attention. This also made those who wanted to come over to say hello and curry favor with them dispel the idea in their hearts. Everyone had a tacit understanding as they walked in the direction of the palace. Chu Luiwei turned a blind eye to all of this. Looking at these people, there was only one thought in her mind. Perhaps the Red Moon Desert had never been so lively. And all of this started from one eye. Chu Luiwei tried to call out to Dumpling and Zichen in his heart a few more times, but there was still no response. Soon it was night time. The temperature plummeted, and the night was pitch black. White frost appeared on the ground. All kinds of discussions could be heard from all around. "What is this place? It's so hot during the day but so cold at night. What's more strange is that I can actually see the palace in the dark. Didn't they say that the secret to breaking through the threshold to become a god is hidden inside? It's normal for such a sacred object to be stored in a place like this." Hearing these words, Chu Luiwei stared ahead. The thick darkness enveloped the earth, and there were no stars or moon in the sky. However, at the far end of the desert, the palace was brilliantly lit, and the light was brilliant. It stood quietly between heaven and earth, as if it had been there for tens of thousands of years, eternally indestructible. Although it was still shrouded in fog and couldn't be seen clearly, one could still feel the boundless feeling from the palace. Suddenly, a strange fluctuation came from the ring of cosmos. She was startled. This fluctuation came from the armillary shield. She separated a part of her consciousness and probed into the ring of cosmos in her hand. The armillary shield flickered with light. Chu Luiwei was suddenly stunned, because she suddenly realized that the light on the armillary shield seemed to be exactly the same as the light around the palace. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 21:14. Chu Luiwei's heart seemed to have been hit by something, and the blood in her body seemed to have frozen at this moment. This kind of perception was very subtle. Ordinary people would not be able to distinguish the similarities and differences between the same flickering light. But Chu Luiwei was different. She was the owner of the armillary sky shield. Back then, She had personally attracted the countless mountain fires under the Peach Blossom Cove to temper the armillary sky shield and remove the rust. The scene of the flowing light flying up and enveloping the armillary sky shield was still vivid in her mind. No one remembered it more clearly than her, and no one was more familiar with it than her. At first, she did not notice it, but when the armillary sky shield suddenly moved, she realized that the light on it was exactly the same as the white light surrounding the palace. That kind of aura. She would never mistake it. Yuer. Chu Liwei suddenly stopped in her tracks, and her companions all looked over. Rong Xiu called out to her softly. Chu Liwei suddenly came back to her senses and raised her eyes again, staring straight ahead. Could it be that the secret related to the armillary sky shield was hidden in the palace? Back then, Su Li had said that the armillary sky shield suddenly appeared and smashed into the Peach Blossom Cove. No one knew its origin and no one knew anything related to it. I just suddenly thought of something. Chu Liwei shook her head, indicating that she was fine. She took a deep breath and continued walking forward. It was just that her pace was slightly faster than before. Rong Xiu's eyes drooped slightly, and his gaze swept past her hand. That ring was his, so he naturally knew what had happened. An obscure light flashed past his deep eyes. When he raised his eyes again, his expression was still as usual. This small episode did not attract anyone's attention. Another 3 days passed. There were already 40 to 50 people heading towards the palace from all over the desert. Other than those first-rate families and clans, there were also some weaker gangs. Other than that, there were even people who barged in alone. Clearly, the newly opened Dao Gate world was extremely attractive to the various experts in the Divine Ruins world. Even if they could not succeed, it was good to come and see with their own eyes. Moreover, luck was something that was hard to predict. Perhaps a pie had fallen from the sky, and it just so happened to hit someone? After trekking for such a long time, the distance between them and the palace was finally reduced. Unfortunately, it was shrouded in white mist. Apart from its rough outline, nothing else could be seen clearly. After the celestial shield produced that ripple, the ripple's range and commotion became increasingly intense as Chu Liwei got closer and closer. At this point, Chu Liwei was absolutely convinced that the armillary shield had some kind of close connection with it. 5 days later, everyone finally arrived before the palace. At this moment, everyone finally noticed that the hall was actually floating in midair. There was still an extremely high distance between its bottom and the desert below. It was only because everyone was quite far away and there were continuous sand dunes blocking their line of sight that they did not discover it. Chu Liwei looked up and carefully sized up the pavilion in the sky, in front of him. Even though they had already arrived here, they still could not see its specific appearance clearly. They could barely make out that it was an extremely magnificent palace. The words on the plaque were covered up very well. Is the secret hidden in this palace? A voice came from the crowd, faintly tinged with excitement. Everyone looked forward with different expressions, but the excitement and curiosity in their eyes were the same. It was obviously impossible to say that they did not have the slightest bit of ambition and expectation after arriving at this place with great difficulty. But now that so many people had arrived, it was a problem to decide who would enter first. Shiru approached Chu Liwei and said, You are the first to arrive here, and this Red Moon Desert is the territory of your Tianling dynasty. No matter what, you are the most qualified to enter first, right? When she said this, she deliberately raised her voice a little so that the others present could hear. As soon as she finished speaking, there was a commotion in the crowd. They did not know that Chu Liwei had such a relationship with this desert. If that was really the case, then they should indeed be the first to enter. Some of them wanted to question a little, but after seeing Rong Xiu and the others, they chose to shut their mouths. Chu Liwei nodded, then looked around and said, If no one has any objections, I will go first. Although she said it in an inquiring tone, after she finished speaking, she directly lifted her feet and walked forward. Everyone was speechless. You don't plan to let others go first, do you? Why are you still asking? In fact, Chu Liwei really did not care about this order at first. But considering the armillary shield, she still decided to be the first to seize the opportunity. The fluctuations on the armillary shield became more and more intense. Chu Liuyue's heart also beat faster. Step by step, she walked forward and was about to reach the stone door. However, at this moment, a figure suddenly rushed out from the side and beat Chu Liyue to it. Chu Liyue's eyes turned cold. Just as she was about to move, a strong sense of uneasiness suddenly surged in her heart. Without hesitation, she flew up and retreated. And that person had already rushed to the stone door. Bang! A transparent barrier suddenly appeared. That person did not react for a moment. When he realized the danger and wanted to retreat in panic, it was already too late. He slammed heavily into the barrier. Strangely, this crash did not make any sound. But then, everyone saw an extremely bloody and cruel scene. That man's body shook and he spat out blood, but his body did not fly out because of the rebound force. Instead, it stuck tightly to the barrier. Then, a thin ripple surged on the barrier. That ripple slowly swept over, crushing that person bit by bit and swallowing him. Just like that, his body gradually disappeared under everyone's extremely shocked gazes. Until the end, there was not a single trace left. The scorching wind in the desert blew the coarse sand over. That ripple quietly dissipated, and that barrier also returned to its previous transparent appearance. Finally, it silently disappeared. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. In the blink of an eye, a fresh life was gone just like that. And there was not even a corpse left. Everyone fell into a dead silence. Shock, fear, panic. The scene in front of them was like a basin of cold water that completely extinguished the ardent anticipation and desire in everyone's hearts. Even if they wanted the treasure, they had to be alive. But at this moment, as long as they took a step forward, they would be in hell. Shiru was so shocked that she broke out in a cold sweat. Thank goodness. Thank goodness you didn't go over just now, or else the person who died would be Chu Liyue. However, Chu Liyue only stopped for a short moment and then walked forward again. Wonderful book house. Chapter 21:15. Seeing her move, everyone looked at her as if they were looking at a lunatic. Was Chu Liyue tired of living? It wasn't like she didn't see how tragically that person died just now. She was gambling with her life by rushing forward like this. Shiru hurriedly shouted, "It's dangerous over there. Don't go first." Chu Liyue stood still, turned around and asked, "If we don't go now, when should we go? Didn't we walk for so long just to enter this place and take a look?" Shiru was stunned. After hesitating for a while, she said, Then we can wait for a while. Let's discuss countermeasures together. It was always good to be more prepared." Seeing that Chu Liyue didn't seem to be listening, Shiru looked at Rong Xiu again. "Holy Sun, please persuade her." Rong Xiu's lips curved slightly and he followed her. "We have to go in sooner or later. There's no difference." Shiru was dumbfounded. Why were this couple so stubborn? They were already powerful enough. Even if they couldn't get the rumored treasure, it shouldn't affect them too much, right? Why did they have to risk their lives like this? She wanted to say something else, but she saw that the rest of the people also followed them. Yi Zhao came to Chu Liyue's side. "I'll go first." His strength was much higher than Chu Liyue's. Even if there was any danger, he could block it from the front. Chu Liyue smiled and shook her head. "Thank you for your kindness, Senior Yi Zhao, but I don't think I need it." Yi Zhao looked at her steadily, didn't say anything, and took a step back. He knew Chu Liyue's ability. Since she said so, he would listen to her. Shiru watched anxiously from behind. In the end, she could only grit her teeth and follow. If something really happened, they might be able to help if they were closer. This time, no one tried to snatch it. Everyone's eyes fell on Chu Liyue. They wanted to see what was waiting for her. Ever since the battle between Peach Blossom Doc and Yi Wentao, Chu Liyue had risen to fame. Many people wanted to see just how strong she was. Chu Liyue soared into the air and stood in front of the palace's stone door, facing it from a distance. She held her breath and raised her hand to reach forward. On her slender and fair finger, there was a quaint and magnificent interspatial ring. The armillary heaven shield was among them. When no one was near, that layer of transparent barrier would not flash, and even pressure would not be able to detect it. However, Chu Luiyue clearly remembered the location of the barrier. She slowly reached out her hand. Suddenly, a faintly discernible force appeared in front of her palm. She made up her mind and continued without hesitation. That transparent barrier appeared once again. The people who were waiting anxiously at the side heard the buzzing sound. Their hearts beat violently and almost jumped out of their chests. Some people subconsciously took a few steps back, afraid that they would be affected. However, in the next moment, a shocking scene appeared. Chu Luiyue's hand passed through the barrier smoothly. Not only did the transparent barrier not attack her at all, it even let her pass without a hitch. The scene seemed to have frozen. No one expected the situation to develop in such a strange way. In a strange silence, Chu Luiyue continued to walk forward. Her figure smoothly crossed over the barrier and entered the inside. She was unharmed. Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at the transparent barrier behind her. She heaved a sigh of relief. The expressions on everyone's faces immediately became very interesting. What was going on? When that person went forward, he did not have time to react before he was crushed and swallowed by the barrier. Why was everything different when it came to Chu Luiyue? She did not even put up any defense. She entered the barrier easily. Then Rong Xiu strode in with his long legs. By the time everyone reacted, Chu Luiyue and the others had all entered the barrier. Chu Luiyue raised her head at Shi Ru, who was dumbfounded. "Follow her." Shi Ru came back to her senses and stammered in response. She was very nervous at first, but when she saw Chu Luiyue's relaxed expression, she inexplicably calmed down a little. She gritted her teeth and followed in without hesitation. It was as if a strong and domineering force scraped across her body. However, this feeling only lasted for a moment and disappeared in the blink of an eye. At this moment, she had successfully entered the barrier. Shi Ru was surprised and happy. "You're here?" When the elders saw this scene, they followed one after another. Everything went smoothly. The terrifying scene from before did not happen again. Chu Luiyue turned around and looked at the palace in front of her. A white mist drifted over. She glanced at it and found that it was formed by abundant heaven and earth energy. The density of the force within the barrier was much higher than that of the Peach Blossom Cove. Chu Luiyue took a deep breath and suppressed the waves in her heart. Then she walked forward. She did not need to do it. The energy automatically flowed into her body. Apart from her, everyone else also did the same. Shi Ru was shocked. "I have never seen such abundant heaven and earth energy. What is this place? If I can cultivate in this place." She wondered how fast the breakthrough would be. Hearing her words, the people who were still watching outside became restless again. Some people could not hold back and followed in. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 21:16. A hurried and shrill scream came from behind. Chu Luiyue stopped in her tracks and looked back. Above the transparent barrier, another ripple had appeared out of nowhere, slowly and calmly surging. A young woman was swallowed in the blink of an eye, and she did not even have time to cry out for help. This sudden turn of events caused everyone's hearts to palpitate with fear. How could this be? Those people in front clearly went in successfully. Someone asked with a panicked expression. After Chu Luiyue and the others entered the barrier, 7 or 8 people followed, and nothing happened. But this woman, she went to the side. Guesses came from the crowd. She seemed to be a little anxious just now, and wanted to be in front, so she went that way. After Chu Luiyue successfully entered, the barrier was no longer hidden. Therefore, everyone followed the path she had taken when she entered. But that young woman was a little eager for quick success, and wanted to be the first to enter from other positions. They did not expect this to happen. Hiss, if that's the case, doesn't that mean that in this huge barrier, only this small area is safe? Someone's question made everyone quiet down, and their expressions were complicated. This guess sounded too fake. The barrier was a hole, and logically speaking, if one could enter from one place, then the other places would be the same. They had never heard of such a division. But the truth was in front of them, and this was the most likely explanation. After a while, someone tried to continue forward and cautiously passed through the position Chu Luiwei had just walked. Everything went smoothly, and no accidents happened. That person let out a long sigh of relief, and at the same time, it made everyone more certain of their previous guess. Many people looked at Chu Luiwei with complicated expressions. This, although they had heard some rumors about Chu Luiwei and knew that this woman was very capable, this situation was far beyond everyone's expectations. Could it be that this barrier only recognized her? Chu Luiwei's eyes moved slightly, but she did not say anything and continued to walk forward. At this time, she had already reached the stone door at the front. She raised her head slightly, stared at it, and finally pushed the door open and entered. The stone door slowly opened in front of him. Chu Luiwei quickly glanced inside and was a little surprised. This was an extremely wide area. As far as the eye could see, it was the palace that they had been looking at from afar. In front of the palace was a huge circular plaza. The entire plaza was made of black jade, and the quality was excellent. Chu Luiwei glanced at it, but did not recognize what kind of jade it was. She had seen a lot of good things, and there were very few things that she didn't recognize. Around the square, there were several white jade pillars that were about as thick as two people hugging each other. They were carved with different patterns and looked very mysterious. In Chu Luiwei's memory, she had never seen such a palace. However, the energy fluctuations on the armillary heaven shield were even more intense. Chu Luiwei stepped forward. Right at this moment, an extremely tyrannical aura suddenly came from the square. Chu Luiwei heard a faint sound, and in the next moment, his vision blurred. The armillary heaven shield flew out from the universe ring on her hand and went straight to the black jade square. Chu Luiwei's heart suddenly jumped. He immediately looked up and saw that the armillary heaven shield had flown to the center of the square. It quietly floated above the square, and rays of light overflowed and quickly enveloped it. Then, the light poured down like water and poured into the black jade square. At this moment, Chu Luiwei finally saw that the center of the black jade square was missing a piece. The most important thing was that the missing piece was exactly the same as the armillary heaven shield. At a glance, it almost made people think that once the armillary heaven shield fell, it would fit perfectly. At this moment, those rays of light flowed out from the armillary heaven shield and poured into the missing piece. There were many patterns around it that were connected to it, and it was mysterious and complicated. Perhaps it was because it was too old, and it was difficult to see clearly and distinguish. However, Chu Luiwei could see clearly that the rays of light that were gradually accumulating were surging in all directions along the grooves of these patterns. No, that's not right. Chu Luiwei stared at the black jade square. The armillary heaven shield. Perhaps it originally belonged to this place. What's that? A shield? It seems to have flown over Shangguan Yu's body? I heard that she did have a very powerful black shield. I think this is it? But why does that thing seem to fit perfectly with the missing piece in the square? More and more people came in. After seeing this scene, all kinds of discussions came one after another. Shiru asked in a low voice. You have been here before? Chu Luiwei shook his head. But that barrier and this shield, Shiru bit her lip. Of course, she trusted Chu Luiwei very much, but others might not. After so many things had happened, it was obvious that Chu Luiwei was inextricably linked to this place. She said that she had never been here before, but it was not very convincing. Chu Luiwei frowned slightly. Even if Shiru didn't say it, she knew very well that everyone was suspecting her. That barrier was extremely terrifying, yet she was able to enter unscathed. This square was mysterious and powerful, and she happened to have a shield that was very likely to come from this place. She had long expected that this place might be related to the armillary heaven shield, but she didn't expect it to be like this. As the lustrous light on the armillary heaven shield flowed down and gradually filled up the hollow space, Chu Luiwei suddenly felt that the connection between her and the armillary heaven shield seemed to have weakened a lot. She suddenly thought of something, and her heart sank. Could it be that this black jade square was... The power on the heavenly square cauldron is weakening. Su Li's voice suddenly came from the bottom of her heart. Chu Liwei was shocked. What? She quickly gathered her divine sense and found that the transparent hellfire in the heavenly square cauldron was much weaker than before. At first glance, it seemed that it would be extinguished at any time. This situation had never happened before. Chu Liwei raised her eyes again and looked at the black jade square. The power in the armillary heaven shield was being drained bit by bit. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 21:17. Chu Liwei quickly checked the Great Azure Sun Axe and the Flowing Cloud Flying Diagram. Fortunately, these two divine artifacts had not encountered such a situation yet. She turned to look at Rong Xiu and asked, "Rong Xiu, is there anything wrong with the Thousand Peaks halberd?" Rong Xiu shook his head. Chu Liwei relaxed a little. It seemed that it started with the heavenly square cauldron. It was not too late to stop it now. She made up her mind and was about to step forward. However, she could not take the step. There was an invisible pressure in front of her, blocking her from entering the black jade square. After a few attempts, it ended in failure. In the end, Chu Liwei summoned the heavenly square cauldron. The transparent square cauldron landed heavily on the ground in front of her with a dull thud. Chu Liwei looked inside. In just a short while, the karmic fire inside had weakened by a lot. She had to hurry. Chu Liwei thought to herself. Everyone was shocked when they saw her actions. Soon, someone recognized the heavenly square cauldron. After all, it was one of the 10 great divine artifacts. Not many people had seen it with their own eyes. Now that they saw it, they could not help but feel curious and envious. However, no one dared to show the slightest covetousness. Although the treasure was good, their lives were more important. Not to mention that Chu Liwei was not to be trifled with. Just Rong Xiu and the others were enough to intimidate everyone. Only a fool would choose to snatch Chu Liwei's things at this time. However, they did not know what Chu Liwei was trying to do, so they could only guess in their hearts. Bam! Chu Liwei slammed her palm on the heavenly square cauldron. A vigorous force was injected into it. Boom! Transparent karmic fire rose. Darkness. It was endless, as if there was no escape. When Dumpling opened her eyes, this was the scene she saw. As far as the eye could see, the surrounding area was filled with darkness that was so thick that it seemed like it could not be dissolved. She was originally lying on the ground, but after a moment, she vaguely remembered what had happened. She only remembered that she was originally fighting with Ziqin, but as they fought, a whirlpool suddenly appeared under her feet. In a moment of carelessness, she was directly swallowed into the vortex. Since then, she had been unconscious and had only woken up now. She had no recollection of what had happened in between. Thinking of this, she hurriedly shouted, "Ziqin? Ziqin!" As she shouted, she stood up. The sound of chains rattling could be heard, and her body was pulled back. Bang! Dumpling's head hit a hard wall. It hurts. Dumpling gritted her teeth and rubbed her head. Halfway through, she finally realized that something was wrong. With a thought, a reddish-gold flame gushed out of her palm. The flame danced, instantly illuminating this side of the world. She looked at her hands and realized that each of her wrists was bound by a black chain. And behind her was a black wall. The other end of the chain was embedded in it. Dumpling was stunned for a long time. Was she locked up? After coming back to her senses, she was immediately furious. Who has the guts to lay a hand on me? Get out here. Ever since she broke through to the crimson gold celestial phoenix and became the young master, no one had dared to treat her like this. The surroundings were quiet, and only her voice echoed in the distance. This seemed to be an extremely sealed space. Dumpling waited for a while, but there was still no response. She gritted her teeth, intending to break the chain on her wrists. However, after trying, she was shocked to find that the chain was extremely hard, and she could not break free from it at all. After that, Dumpling tried many methods, but it was still useless. This chain was very strange. She kicked the wall hard. Who knew that such a thing would happen when she was having a good time fighting with Zichen? She wondered if Ayu. Suddenly, Dumpling's expression froze. She realized that the connection between her and Ayu seemed to have been broken. Dumpling finally became nervous. After trying a few more times, she was sure that she had completely lost contact with Ayu. Even if there was a contract between them, it was still the same. For so many years, such a thing had never happened. Dumpling's throat was a little dry, and her heart was beating fast. At this moment, she finally realized that the situation seemed to be more serious than she had expected. Zichen? She shouted a few more times, hoping to get Zichen's response. If she remembered correctly, when she fell into the vortex, Zichen seemed to have followed her down. Even if she could not contact Ayu for the time being, it would be good to talk to Zichen. However, to her disappointment, no matter how she shouted, she could not hear Zichen's voice. Tuanzi's brows gradually furrowed. Right at this moment, a gust of chilly aura surrounded them from all directions. Dumpling was shocked and instinctively looked up. A huge, scarlet eye appeared in front of her. Tuanzi gasped in shock. This eye seemed to be the mysterious existence under the vortex? She gritted her teeth and said word by word, "You're the one who brought me down and locked me up here?" That eye looked at her just like that. A faintly discernible voice seemed to come from a very far place. Unfortunately, you've only opened the 5th meridian. Compared to Ling, you're far behind. Dumpling's body stiffened. Ling was the name of her ancestor. Wonderful Book House. Chapter 21:18. Who exactly are you? Dumpling clenched her fists and stared at the extremely strange eye in front of her. At first, she did not think much of the other party, but the words just now contained too much information. Not many people knew the ancestor's name, and this tone, Qi. A black stream of light suddenly flew out. Like an extremely sharp knife, it instantly cut open a wound on Dumpling's arm. Dark red beads of blood quickly gushed out. If one looked carefully, they could see a faint golden color within. However, this golden color was extremely obscure and mixed with the rich blood color. It was not obvious. This was the symbol of the purest bloodline. The higher the number of meridians opened, the purer this golden color would be. At this moment, Dumpling had only opened her 5th meridian, and that golden color had just flashed. Dumpling was shocked and quickly covered her wound. She had clearly wanted to dodge just now, but the other party was faster than her. Suddenly, an ice-cold aura entered her body from her wound. Dumpling was stunned, because this aura was actually an extremely rich and pure energy. After that energy entered her wound, it quickly spread through her limbs and bones, nourishing every inch of her flesh and blood. Dumpling was at a loss. She thought that the other party wanted to kill her, but what was going on? Soon, a second wave of energy entered her body. This dark and sealed cage contained an astonishing amount of heaven and earth energy. Dumpling's body was like a sponge, rapidly devouring this energy. Sensing that the aura around her was rising, Tuanzi gradually felt a little uneasy. The other party could not have spent so much effort to capture her just to help her cultivate, right? But soon, Dumpling knew where this uneasiness came from. The continuous influx of energy gradually exceeded the limits of her body. As time slowly passed, every part of her body started to ache. She was extremely talented, but she had only opened her 5th meridian after all, and there were certain limitations in all aspects. If she swallowed too much energy at once, it would only be harmful to her body. The pain in many parts of her body became more intense. Dumpling could not help but grit her teeth and shout, "What are you trying to do?" That voice came from afar, hoarse and cold. Naturally, to help you open your meridians. The origin power in Chuyu's body was rapidly depleting. The flames within the heavenly square cauldron burned once again. The sparkling light on the armillary heaven shield dimmed significantly. Rong Xiu put one hand behind his back, his eyes dark. Suddenly, with a flash of light, the myriad peaks halberd appeared in his hand. He raised his arm, and the 1,000 peaks halberd flew out in an instant. Chu Liwei looked up and saw that there was a golden flame burning at the end of the Thousand Peaks halberd. As the Thousand Peaks halberd flew forward, the flame drew a straight golden line in the air. At the same time, it quickly spread and formed a long golden tail in the blink of an eye. The Thousand Peaks halberd brushed past the bottom of the Armillary Heaven shield and flew out. The flowing light that was pouring down was instantly severed by this golden tail. Chu Liu's eyes lit up, and she immediately summoned the Armillary Heaven shield back. After escaping the control of the mysterious power on the Black Jade Plaza, the Armillary Heaven shield quickly flew back to Chu Liu's hand. Almost at the same time, the flowing light in the groove on the Black Jade Plaza also quickly dissipated and disappeared. The fluctuations on the Armillary Heaven shield also finally quieted down. Chu Liwei looked at the Armillary Heaven shield in her hand. It was black and simple, and had already returned to its original appearance. Everything happened in the blink of an eye. Chu Liwei let out a long breath and put away the heavenly square cauldron. However, she held the Armillary Heaven shield tightly in her hand. She also summoned Scarlet Heaven Sword. At this moment, the Thousand Peaks halberd had also returned to Rong Xiu's hand. She looked at Rong Xiu, and a trace of fluctuation flashed through her eyes. Others did not know, but she knew that what had helped the Armillary Heaven shield to break free was actually not the Thousand Peaks halberd, but Rong Xiu's golden flame. Just as she was about to ask, a panicked cry for help suddenly came from behind her. Save me. Chu Liwei turned around and saw a man who looked to be in his 30s, looking at his hands with a panicked expression. Chu Liu's gaze turned slightly, and she was immediately stunned. That man's hands had actually split open with many small bloody wounds, and it looked like they were dripping with blood. This kind of injury was not considered serious, but the key point was, the appearance of these bloody wounds was too strange. A man in a purple robe standing next to that man immediately frowned and asked, "Fourth brother, what happened to you?" Chu Liwei glanced at the person who spoke, and she recognized him, Ziguang County's Princess Yao Bin. Back in Fangzhou City, they had interacted before, so she had a deep impression of him. Yao Lin was extremely frightened, and his voice trembled. There's a problem with the energy of heaven and earth here. Big brother, don't you all realize that we can't stop this energy from entering our bodies with just our own strength? At first, no one understood what he meant, but after each of them tried, their expressions changed. No, this energy really seems to be unstoppable. How can this be? If this goes on, won't we be in danger? The crowd immediately became nervous and noisy. The body of a cultivator was like a container. Depending on their strength and other aspects, the amount of energy they could contain was also different. Once the limit was exceeded, the cultivator's body would not be able to bear it and would be damaged. If it was light, they would be injured, and if it was heavy, they would explode and die. After Yao Lin came here, he saw that the energy here was abundant. He was extremely excited and began to crazily devour it. However, when he wanted to stop, he realized that things were already out of his control. At this moment, his body's tolerance had almost reached its limit. Because he could not bear it, the energy overflowed, and many wounds appeared on his hands. However, the surrounding heaven and earth energy continued to surge into his body. The situation was getting worse. If this went on, it would not be long before his entire body exploded. How could Yao Lin not be nervous when he realized this? Soon, the other people in the crowd were also in the same situation. Yao Bin immediately set up a barrier and surrounded Yao Lin. He wanted to use this method to keep the energy outside. However, he soon realized that this method would not work at all. This was because his barrier could not stop the energy at all. In a short time, Yao Lin's injuries had already spread to his arms. His sleeves were stained with blood. Yao Bin made a prompt decision, "I'll send you out now." As long as he could leave this place, everything would be fine. Yao Lin quickly nodded and turned to leave. However, when he turned around, he was stunned. The tall and majestic stone door was already tightly shut. Wonderful book house. Chapter 21:19. When did the door close? Why didn't they notice it at all? However, Yao Lin had no time to think about that. He was stunned for a moment before he continued to walk toward the stone door. Yao Bin and the other people from Purple Light County followed behind him. Yao Bin was the first to reach the stone door. He placed his hand on the stone door without hesitation and pushed hard. The stone door did not budge. Yao Bin's heart sank. He was a high god, but he was only one step away from becoming a god. He was definitely not weak. But now, he could not even open a door? He took a deep breath and tried again. This time, he used all his strength. However, the stone door still did not open. At this moment, there were more and more wounds on Yao Lin's body. Dark red blood stains started to drip down continuously. Let's help. Us too. Seeing that the situation was not right, many people chose to help. Those who could come here were not ordinary people. How could they not know the danger when they saw the situation? If they were trapped here, none of them would be able to escape. Many people gathered in front of the stone door, trying to open it together. However, no matter what they tried, it was futile. Looking at the heavy and majestic stone door, everyone's hearts sank. Fear and anxiety spread everywhere. Even then, the surrounding energy of heaven and earth continued to enter their bodies. More and more people were injured. Some of them could not hold on any longer. What the hell is this place? They thought that it was a treasure trove. Who knew that? Bang! Yao Lin's body swayed, fell to the ground and fainted. Fourth brother. Yao Bin was shocked. He quickly bent over to help him up. Don't move. Suddenly, a clear voice was heard. Yao Bin turned his head and saw that the person who spoke was Chu Luiyue. He instinctively stopped moving. Master? Master Yu? He wanted to call him Shangguan Yu, but when he thought of the fact that Master Yu was now the master of Peach Blossom Cove, he changed his way of addressing him. Purple Light County was a first-class clan, but it was slightly inferior to the Master Yu residents of Peach Blossom Cove. This was a form of respect. Chu Luiyue walked over. He has devoured too much energy and has already exceeded the limits of what his body can bear. If he acts rashly now, his body will explode and he will die. At that time, Princess Yao would be affected as well. Yao Bin clenched his fists. How could he not understand this logic? However, he couldn't just watch Yao Lin die here, right? Everyone, please make way. I'll see if I can save him. Chu Luiyue said. Yao Bin was stunned. Master Yu, you mean, you have a way to save him? Chu Luiyue said, it's just a test. If Princess Yao is unwilling, I'm willing. Yao Bin hurriedly nodded. He was very clear that just relying on their strength alone, there was no way to save Yao Lin. If Chu Luiyue was willing to help, perhaps they would have a chance to survive. Didn't he see the people standing behind her? He would just have to make every possible effort. After that, he took a few steps back to make room for Chu Luiyue. When the others saw this, they hurriedly retreated as well. Chu Luiyue walked to Yao Lin's side and squatted down. She put 2 fingers together and placed them on Yao Lin's pulse. Violent energy was rampaging in Yao Lin's body. Yao Lin couldn't control such an astonishing power at all. If this continued, it wouldn't be long before his body and soul were destroyed. Chu Luiyue held her breath and focused. The water droplet in her dantian slowly rotated. Soon, the energy in Yao Lin's body began to flow into Chu Luiyue's dantian. Everyone watched nervously from the side. After a while, they realized that the violent and raging energy in Yao Lin's body gradually subsided. Yao Bin watched for a while and suddenly realized something. Chu Luiyue had transferred all the energy in Yao Lin's body into her own body. Master Yu, what you're doing is too dangerous. Yao Bin wanted to stop her. Although he didn't want to see his 4th brother die like this, they would feel uneasy if others were harmed because of this. Chu Luiyue smiled and lightly said, That's right. I know what I'm doing. Yao Bin was stunned. Only then did he realize that Chu Luiyue had nothing to do with them. Why would she take the risk for them? If she was willing to do this, there was an 80% chance that she had another trump card. Yao Bin glanced at Rong Xiu, who was standing next to him. He saw that his handsome and noble face was calm, as if he wasn't worried at all. Only then did Yao Bin relax a little. The surrounding people looked at each other. Using this method to save someone, wasn't Chu Luiwei afraid that something would happen to her? Although she was very strong, she wasn't even a god now. If she did this, she shouldn't be able to last long, right? After about half an hour, Chu Luiwei finally let go of her hand and stood up. Alright, this time, he should be able to last for a while. Yao Bin went forward and checked carefully. Only then did he realize that the violent energy in Yao Bin's body had been completely extracted. He looked at Chu Luiwei in shock, but found that her expression was normal. It was as if she wasn't affected at all. Chu Luiwei closed her eyes and sent a part of her energy into Scarlet Heaven Sword. Clang! The sword rang. Chu Luiwei suddenly opened her eyes, raised Scarlet Heaven Sword high, and then slashed down fiercely. A biting cold sword energy went straight to the black jade square in front of them. Boom! The intense sound of energy colliding rang out. The ground suddenly shook. Wonderful book house, you're tuning in to the Han Li's Immortal Journey YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.